listener production.
The amount of information that's coming at people can sometimes be overwhelming.
Parents who may have a 2-year-old child who expected their life to go a certain way, they will go through a period of grief and all of those emotions that will follow.
There's been this argument that maybe they're not so good at social interactions. If the structure's right and they're in the sort of right situations, they actually can be great at social interaction.
That doesn't mean you're not going to feel a little bit, oh, whoops, what does that mean? And what does that make my life to date look like?
Hi, Sacha Barbour Gatt with you. Welcome to episode 1 of a special 5-part series of The Briefing. Earlier this year, Thomas Denham, one of the producers who works in the listener building with us at Triple M Sydney, approached our executive producer to pitch a podcast idea. Tom had always suspected he was autistic, but had never been diagnosed, and he wanted to find out. Tom's almost 30 and had always wondered if he was on the spectrum, but had never formally spent any time with anyone who could make a definitive diagnosis. Not only did he want to find out, but he also wanted to do it with us here on The Briefing to try to help other people who might be like him. So we reached out to Autism Awareness Australia and Sydney University's Brain and Mind Centre to work alongside us on Tom's journey of discovery. Its goal is simple: to improve the lives of all Australians on the autism spectrum and the families and friends who love them.
I think I didn't want to go around saying, I've got autism or I'm on the autism spectrum without really knowing that for sure. I think there were definitely signs that I kind of felt, this kind of aligns with neurodiversity. But I think it would have been wrong of me to just go out and make that assumption myself.
That was Tom, and we'll formally meet him tomorrow. But first, let's begin with talking about what autism is. Professor Adam Guastella is a clinical psychologist at Sydney's Westmead Hospital and the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Centre. Professor Guastella, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing and for joining us on Tom's journey of discovery. What exactly is autism?
We think about autism as a neurodevelopmental condition, and basically that means it's a condition that people are born with. It affects learning and the way that people process information, the way that they respond in different types of situations, and the way they see the world. And we've really shifted that understanding of autism from being something that we wanted to try to fix or something that we needed to, I hate to use the word cure, but the shift has really been accepting a lot of those processing differences and then thinking about, well, actually, people operate in very different ways in all settings, but for people on the spectrum, how can we make their environments more effective and their supports more effective so they can learn and operate and to get the most out of what they want to do? And the narrative around that's been really, really important because I think it's shifted this tendency for people to blame themselves or to feel like they're not good enough into actually, you know what, this is actually a difference that I can be proud of and I can make a difference. And often it's also a reflection of how brave they've had to be in different situations where things aren't set up for them. So it's a neurodevelopmental condition, it's lifelong, but we now think of it like many other neurodevelopmental conditions in a way that just means that they process things differently and may need different types of supports.
Is autism classified as a mental illness?
Good question. It's actually defined in the DSM, which is a psychiatric diagnostic manual. So it is a mental illness because it is in that manual. But in reality, it is a developmental condition. It's certainly not a mental illness as we might think of, say, depression or anxiety, which comes and goes. The best way I can say it is a developmental condition.
What might be some of the common traits for someone who is on the autism spectrum?
Yeah, so it's always hard to talk about traits because the features that we use to define autism can be classified in terms of how people communicate and how they show focused interests and, if you like, a way of systematising, organising the world around them. And so it can be expressed in so many different ways. But what we tend to see are people that really like structure. They benefit with structure. They structure the world in different ways, I guess. That's a broad statement, but probably accurate. That can mean that they can get really interested in certain topics and their sort of expertise they've built up over the years can be highly specialised. And there's been this argument that maybe they're not so good at social interactions. But I think where that's gone really is that if the structure's right and they're in the sort of right situations, they actually can be, great at social interactions, but it's often the amount of information that's coming at people can sometimes be overwhelming. And so it can be really hard for them to navigate some of those social situations. So we often see people struggle with being overwhelmed or understanding busy situations and social situations.
What should a parent or a partner or a friend do if they're listening to this and they think that, their child or their partner or their friend might have some of these characteristics or traits? How should they help them take the next step and find out if they are on the spectrum?
Yeah, so if I was saying what should I be looking for, say my child, I'll just go back to the previous question because I think there's a bit more to say there. The sorts of signs we're looking for in early childhood are children that might get a little bit more focused on solitary play, and the way they play becomes very structured and ordered. So the classic sort of play behaviour that flags some signs is when kids are constantly lining things up or counting, or the way that they're playing with an object isn't really about the creative aspect of it. It's more about it being used for a sort of if you like, a structure or a routine. And then along with that, if there's sort of, as I said, the solitary play, the sort of absence of this back and forth is what we're constantly looking for. This sort of, you point and you gesture and you sort of engage children in play. And if they seem to be quite disengaged from that process and it's really hard to garner their sort of intention into the back and forth, or if you go and you try and play with children and disrupt what they want to play and you want to do something different and they really struggle with that shift, they're sorts of some of the things that classically define autism. And then we'll often see some delays around, not in everyone, but in a lot of kids we'll see language developing a bit later than expected or much later sometimes. And other typical developing milestones and things around gait and movement and walking and stuff might be a bit slower. So they're the sorts of signs that might trigger you to go to the GP or paediatrician and go, hey, do you think these are things that I need to get further assessment on? Maybe should we get more supports? It is about getting good quality information and also speaking to a professional, because I think professionals can often provide pretty quick advice about what is something that might be expected and normal and sort of not normal but typical, and versus something that might need a bit of support.
That was Professor Adam Guastella from the Brain and Mind Centre at the University of Sydney. Let's touch base now with Nicole Rogerson. She's the founding CEO and director of Autism Awareness Australia, to learn a little bit more about why people seek clarity on whether or not they're on the spectrum. Nicole, thanks for your time. Welcome to the briefing.
Thanks so much for having me.
So what is the most common reason that you're having families reach out to you? What's the trigger point for parents or carers who are seeing something in their child and thinking, something needs to be checked?
We looked at the data here and we can tell us by our own website that a huge amount of traffic comes directly from one page and one page only, and that's what are the signs of autism. So we know that families with different age children, anywhere from children as young as 18 months through to children who might be 7, 8, 9 years of age, who start wondering why their child's development might look slightly different to their friends' kids or other children in the family, and they start to wonder, and rather than rush to a doctor or rush to an assessment, they often let Google do some working for them. So it's really important for us to make sure that we've got some really good resources ready to go there. So we don't scare families off, we don't scare individuals off, but we just make, there's not a definitive list. With autism, there's no blood test to go and work out whether you have it or not. So understanding what accumulation of some of the signs and symptoms might be contribute towards somebody getting a diagnosis. So that's typically parents who go looking for that when their kids are pretty young.
I'm interested to know about adults as well, because we're going along on this journey with an adult who's nearly 30 years old. What are you seeing there? Is this a recent phenomena of older people trying to seek out an autism diagnosis?
It is definitely a recent phenomena in the last 5 years, and I feel like every year it grows in its intensity. And as such, it won't shock you, but we now have a Know the Signs of Autism in Adults, and that's our second most popular page. But look, we to meet that need, we literally built a resource called Autism What Next, which is, as the name says, wow, I have autism. What the hell do I do next? And that, whilst that is a different journey for parents with a child than it will be for fully fledged adult doing this on their own bat. The same things apply, is that you feel very lost and all of a sudden, well, what does that mean now? Now I've got that diagnosis. What do I do next? So that's exactly why we built that resource.
Is there anything to be frightened of in seeking a diagnosis, no matter what the age of the person is?
There's absolutely no reason to be frightened of it, no. But depending on the family, depending on the age of the child, depending on the cultural background, depending on a whole range of issues, some people will accept and experience that diagnostic period a lot easier than others will. So for parents who may have a 2-year-old child who expected their life to go a certain way, they will go through a period of grief and all of those emotions that will follow. They may feel differently about it when their child's older, but that will be a very trying time. For an autistic adult who's on their own bat going out to say, actually, I need to investigate something about myself that feels different, well, that's already starting from a very empowering place. That doesn't mean you're not going to feel a little bit, oh, whoops, what does that mean? And what does that make my life to date look like? And what does that mean for me now? It opens a whole Pandora's box of other issues, but they start off at different places.
And what is your message for Tom as he begins this journey of discovery?
Oh, look, Tom is so delightful and he's obviously so up for this challenge. So I think my message to him is go easy on yourself. This is okay. You've found this new thing and I'm so glad for you that it gives you context and comfort in how you feel. But there's no timeline here. You don't have to feel a certain way about it. You might have ups and down days. I know a lot of adults have told me sometimes they feel frustrated that their younger years or their teenage years seem to be harder than it needed to be because they didn't have this information. So you might go through this roller coaster of emotions of feeling cool about it and then sometimes not so cool about it. And, why didn't anyone pick this up and why didn't I get the help I needed earlier? So I think go easy is my recommendation.
Nicole Rogerson, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
That was Nicole Rogerson, founding CEO and Director of Autism Awareness Australia. And that is all we have time for in this first episode of our 5-part What If I'm Autistic series. Make sure you join us tomorrow as we meet Tom and head to Professor Guastella's clinic for Tom to begin finding out if he's autistic and if he is, where he most likely sits on the autism spectrum. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Briefing. Before you go, we would love it if you could share this ep with someone you think might like it. It really helps us keep doing the work we do here at The Briefing. You can also show your support on our socials, subscribe to our YouTube channel by searching Listener Newsroom. You can also follow us on TikTok, also at Listener Newsroom, or on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed with another ep tomorrow morning at 6. I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. See you then.